Starting chapter 1, I'm going to cover pages 5 to 12 right now, and just break up chapter 1 into different parts. Chapter 1 is about first language acquisition, so the first thing we're going to talk about is looking at children, how they learn their first language, because as I mentioned before, we think that could help give us a lot of ideas for, this natural, amazing process that we can apply to ESL or EFL, ESL, learning English, as a second language. And there's been a lot of research of children. Everyone's very fascinated with watching children learn language, and it's fun if you have kids when they're 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It's really fun to watch and even document the words they're learning. Of course, we give children a lot of praise when they start using language. Some people think that that's one of the reasons why we're so motivated to learn language, is because everyone gets so excited when we say bye-bye or apple, or we get all this praise, and there's a lot of psychology behind that in terms of really motivating us to learn and to survive. And it is amazing that a child, by the time they're 3 years old, has such a amazing ability to use language, even though at 3 years old they don't know a lot about other things. They really have an amazing ability to use language. That's why we call it acquisition instead of learning, because we feel that a child didn't really study the language per se, but is picking it up or acquiring it just by being around it. Although we do work with children and we talk to them and teach them a certain amount, most of what they're learning seems to be that they're just picking it up. And as they go through just basically their own human development, there's a sequence that children tend to learn language in, like a natural order of acquisition that we're interested in. When we teach ESL, we usually just set up our books simple to complex, like simple grammar, simple words to complex. But there's possibly an order to learning some of the what we will call later grammatical morphemes, like ing or past tense ed. We want to know, maybe we could learn from children. In a way, we could learn what the natural order is of learning those pieces of language. Children do a lot of listening as well, and what we call auditory discrimination. But it's just for your language. Like in Arabic, P and B are the same sound. So it's hard for them to distinguish P and B, which we can distinguish, English speakers can distinguish from a young age, like Paul versus ball, because we learn that because it's necessary. But in other languages, some of the sounds we distinguish, they won't distinguish. So by age 2, a child might have like 50 words in their vocabulary and be able to use what we call telegraphic speech, like red ball, me, mad, car, fast, and putting together just nouns and verbs and what are called content words. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, those are content words that have real meaning, as opposed to function words like the or in or helping verbs that have more of a grammatical function. And they'll put those together. It sounds kind of like a broken type of English, you might say. But what's interesting about children, they're not just imitating like parrots everything we're saying. They are trying to create their own little phrases and sentences. So there's a creative aspect to language use right from the beginning, which kind of goes against the idea that we just learn language by repeating things and saying them over and over again. Right away, like, kids seem to be trying to create their own ideas. And it is a creative process. The one example of language use, like the irregular plurals, like 1 foot, 2 feet, that can take years for kids to acquire, because they can't say 1 foot, 2 foots. That's called overgeneralizing. That's overgeneralization is when a kid seems to learn a rule, like putting s on the end of nouns seems to make them plural, but it doesn't work with man, men, and mice, mouse, things like that. And so an interesting test to do on a child is to see how much they're thinking about language. Is you can say to the child, if there's a verb like wug, W-G, wug, what would be the past tense of wug? And the child would say, I guess it would be wugged, because they have this rule, general rule. And what would be like the present progressive form of wug? And they'll say wugging. Or you can take like bod, B-O-D, the same thing, past tense of bod. Is it bodded or bode? Bodding, will bod, 2 bods. And it just shows, it can kind of reveal what's going on in the child's mind in terms of if they're trying to apply rules that they're learning. Negatives are very hard in English because we have no, and then we have not, and then we have a lot of helping verbs like I do not or I cannot. And so the negative formation in English is tough, and so kids take time to learn that. Questions are hard in English because we invert the word order. So instead of saying my brother is outside, we have to say, is your brother outside? And so questions, we have intonation. We go up with our intonation, which a lot of languages do. We invert or switch word order. So question formation is pretty tough in English, possibly compared to other languages. And that can take time. We also have the who, what, where, when, why questions. According to research, the first WH word is what. What is this? What's that? And then we move on to where and who. And then as we get more cognitive development, more sophisticated thinking, we can ask questions like how, or even when, because we have to have a concept of time when we ask a question about when. So this is, as we have general cognitive development, it goes along with our language development. We also have yes and no questions. Do you live here? Is this yours? And that has a certain structure to it, and intonation. And we have tag questions. Tag questions are like, this is yours, isn't it? Or, you don't like that, do you? You can imagine how tough that is to kind of learn. We also have something called embedded questions, like, I forgot where you live. Or, can you tell me where the bathroom is? So now, as you can see, question formation becomes quite complex. So that's the end of part 1 of chapter 1. If you could just read through the chapter and look through that. And then the next thing I'll be doing, I'll go into cover pages 12 to 14.